Hi everyone, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and today we're diving into a topic that could completely change the way you sound when you speak English. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like people don't really understand you, even when you're using the right words? Maybe you've memorized grammar rules, learned tons of vocabulary, and practiced for hours, but something still feels off when you speak. If that sounds familiar, you are definitely not alone, and today's episode is just for you. We're talking about English pronunciation tips nobody told you, the kind of advice that often gets skipped in traditional courses, but makes a huge difference in real conversations. Most learners think they need to sound like a native speaker to be good at English, but the truth is, sounding clear is way more important than sounding perfect. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together in this episode. But before we get started, let me ask you a favor. If you've ever felt frustrated with your pronunciation or unsure if people can understand you, take a second now to like this episode and subscribe to our channel. Not only does this help more English learners find our community, it also sends a little message to yourself that you're serious about improving your speaking skills. And if you've already done that, thank you. You're part of what makes this community amazing. Now let's take a breath and shake off the pressure. This isn't about judgment or perfection. This podcast is a safe space for learners from all over the world. Whether you're listening from Madrid, Tokyo, New York, or Nairobi, you're in the right place. Here, we believe that your voice matters exactly as it is. We're here to grow together. One word, one sentence, one tip at a time. You know, I once had a conversation with a student from Rome who told me, "Julia, I know all the words, but when I speak, people just look confused." She thought her grammar was the problem. But after just a few pronunciation tweaks, especially focusing on stress and rhythm, everything started to change. Her words started to land. People responded differently. She didn't change what she said, just how she said it. And that's the power of pronunciation. It's not just about sounding more like a native speaker. It's about being heard, being understood, and feeling confident in your voice. In this episode, I'm going to share real tips you can use today. Not abstract theory, but clear steps you can follow. We'll talk about common pronunciation mistakes, small changes that create big results, and ways to practice, even if you're short on time. I'll also tell you real stories from learners across the world who face the same challenges you're going through now, and how they overcame them. So whether you're commuting, cooking, or just relaxing at home, let's turn this moment into your personal English time. Keep listening, because the tips you're going to hear today are the kind of things I wish someone had told me when I was first learning languages. And remember, this podcast isn't just about learning. It's about community. If any of today's tips resonate with you, I'd love for you to share this episode with a friend, or even send us a message about your own experience with pronunciation. We're in this together. And sometimes, the small changes are the ones that make the biggest difference. All right, ready to get into the first tip? Let's go. Let's talk about something that happens to almost every English learner at some point. You spend months, sometimes years, learning vocabulary lists, doing grammar exercises, reading textbooks, maybe even watching videos and taking notes. You feel like you're doing all the right things. Then, the moment comes. You finally try to have a real conversation in English. You open your mouth, speak with confidence, and the other person doesn't understand you. Or they ask you to repeat. Or they just nod politely and change the topic. That moment can be incredibly frustrating. And often, the issue isn't your grammar. It isn't even your vocabulary, it's your pronunciation. I've worked with learners from all over the world, people from cities like Warsaw, Jakarta, Lisbon, and Cape Town, and this pattern is so common that I call it the invisible wall. You don't see the problem coming because nobody really warned you about it. Pronunciation often gets ignored in traditional language courses. The focus tends to be on reading, writing, and grammar. And while those are important, they don't help much when you're trying to communicate in real life. One of my students, Ahmed from Cairo, was an excellent student. He could write beautiful essays, explain complicated grammar rules, and even translate English texts with no problem. But when he went for a job interview in English, he felt like everything collapsed. The interviewer kept asking him to repeat himself. Later he told me, "Julia, I know I used the right words. I even prepared my answers. But they didn't understand me." That moment made him question everything he had learned. It wasn't his knowledge that failed him. It was that he had never really learned how to pronounce the words he knew. This happens because pronunciation is often treated like a side dish in the language learning process. Many teachers avoid it because they don't feel confident teaching it. Some learners avoid it because they feel embarrassed or self-conscious, and in many classrooms, there just isn't enough time. You learn how to spell the word, how to use it in a sentence, but not how to say it out loud in a way that others can clearly understand. Another reason pronunciation gets ignored is that it's invisible. You can see your writing mistakes. You can underline the wrong word. But pronunciation problems are harder to notice. If you mispronounce a word, you might not even realize it, especially if people are too polite to correct you. That's why I always encourage my students to record themselves speaking. It's one of the best ways to become aware of how you actually sound. I'll talk more about that later in the episode, but the point here is that without awareness, it's impossible to improve. I remember working with Sophia, a teacher from Madrid who had been studying English for over 10 years. Her grammar was perfect. Her vocabulary was impressive. But she told me that every time she spoke with native speakers, they would slow down their speech or switch to simpler words. She felt like they didn't see her as fluent, even though she had all the knowledge. She started doubting herself. "Maybe I'm not as fluent as I thought," she said. When we looked closer, we found that small pronunciation habits were affecting how people understood her. For example, she often stressed the wrong syllables in longer words, or dropped final consonants. These things might sound small, but in spoken English, they can completely change how someone hears you. The interesting thing is, once Sophia became aware of those patterns, her confidence changed. She didn't have to learn more grammar. She just had to adjust the way she said what she already knew. That's something I really want you to take away from this episode. Sometimes the solution isn't learning more. It's using what you already know more effectively. Let's also talk about the emotional side of this. Many learners feel nervous or even ashamed when they realize their pronunciation isn't strong. I've heard people say, "I feel like I sound stupid," or "People must think I'm not intelligent." But let me tell you, that's not true. Having an accent or making pronunciation mistakes does not mean you're less smart. It just means you haven't trained that part of your English yet. It's like going to the gym. You might have strong legs, but if you've never worked on your arms, that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means that part needs more practice. There's also the myth that pronunciation will fix itself over time. A lot of learners believe that if they just keep listening to English or keep speaking, their pronunciation will naturally improve. And while listening and speaking are absolutely important, the truth is, Pronunciation usually needs focused practice. You have to train your mouth, your ears, and even your brain to notice the small sounds, the rhythm, the stress, and the melody of English. I once had a listener from Seoul who told me that she watched English dramas every day and still didn't feel confident speaking. When we started working together, I asked if she had ever practiced pronunciation directly. Things like repeating words, recording her voice, or learning how to shape certain sounds. She said no. After just a few weeks of daily short pronunciation, practice, just 5 to 10 minutes a day, she felt a huge difference in her confidence. Her speaking started to match what she was hearing in those dramas. Before, she was a passive listener. Now she was an active speaker. So why is pronunciation ignored? It's often because learners don't realize how central it is to being understood, and teachers, schools, and courses sometimes don't give it the attention it deserves. But if you've ever felt frustrated that people didn't understand you, or if you've ever wondered why your English doesn't sound like it does in your head, pronunciation is probably the missing link. It's not just about sounding good. It's about making sure your message is heard. Your ideas deserve to be heard. You've worked hard to learn this language. Don't let small pronunciation gaps hold you back. Let's talk about something that confuses a lot of English learners: the difference between clear speech and having a perfect accent. I hear this all the time. Julia, I want to sound like a native speaker. And I get it. We grow up thinking that fluency means speaking without an accent, that the goal is to blend in perfectly, as if no one could tell English isn't your first language. But let me tell you something important. You don't need a native accent to be understood. You don't need to sound like someone from London or Los Angeles. What you need, what really matters, is clarity. Clear speech is what allows people to understand you. That's the real goal. And the two things are not the same. A person can have a strong accent and still be perfectly clear. On the other hand, someone can try to copy a native accent and still be difficult to understand if their rhythm or intonation is off. So today, I want to help you focus on what actually helps in real conversations, speaking clearly, not perfectly. Let me introduce you to Hannah, one of my listeners from Seoul. Hannah is an engineer who works with international teams, so she uses English every day. When she first reached out to me, she said, "I hate my accent. I want to sound more American." So we started working together. And what I noticed right away was that Hannah was already understandable. She was just being too hard on herself. Yes, she had a Korean accent, but it wasn't stopping communication. Her real challenge was something else. She often spoke too fast and didn't pause between phrases. That made her harder to follow, especially on phone calls or in meetings. So we focused on slowing down, using better intonation, and adding pauses. Not changing her accent, not trying to erase who she was, but making sure her message came through. A few weeks later, she told me that her coworkers stopped asking her to repeat things. That's the power of clear speech. She still had her accent, and that was fine. But she became easier to understand, which gave her more confidence. And confidence is something people can feel when you speak. It makes a difference. Then there's Marco from Milan. Marco had been watching English movies for years, and he loved trying to mimic the actors. He would repeat scenes from movies like a performance. He actually got really good at copying the American R sound and certain phrases, but when he had to speak in real life, it didn't work the same way. He sounded unnatural. Why? Because copying a native accent without understanding the rhythm and stress of English can actually make your speech harder to understand. I told Marco, "You don't need to act. You need to connect." So instead of focusing on sounding like someone else, we worked on making his natural voice clearer. We practiced things like word stress, knowing which syllable to emphasize, and linking sounds between words. These are the tools of clear communication. Not imitating someone else, but owning your own voice in English. Marco was surprised at how much easier it became to express himself once he stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be clear. And let's not forget Larissa, a graphic designer from São Paulo. She told me she had avoided speaking English in meetings for years because she felt embarrassed about her pronunciation. Her goal, she said, was to speak without any accent. But when I asked her to tell me about a project in English, I understood her completely. Her problem wasn't clarity, it was confidence. She was afraid people would judge her for sounding Brazilian. We talked about that a lot. Where does that fear come from? Many times, learners think that sounding like a native speaker is a sign of success. But in reality, English is spoken by millions of people around the world, all with different accents. A French accent, an Indian accent, a Brazilian accent. They're all valid. What matters is whether your message is clear. Larissa didn't need to get rid of her accent. She needed to believe that she could speak and be understood as she was. So we worked on intonation, on pacing, and on breathing techniques to help her feel more relaxed when speaking. And it worked. She started speaking up more, even leading parts of her team meetings in English. She told me, I stopped trying to sound native. I started trying to sound like myself, but in English. This is a message I repeat often, because so many people need to hear it. You don't have to erase your identity to speak English well. Your goal is not to become someone else. Your goal is to communicate clearly, to share your ideas, to connect with people across the world. English is a tool, and your voice matters, even if it carries the sounds of your first language. Now, let's look at what actually helps with clarity. It's not mastering a local accent. It's learning how English works when it's spoken. That includes things like word stress, knowing that we say record for the noun, and record for the verb. It includes intonation, how your voice rises, or falls to show if you're asking a question or making a statement. It includes connected speech, how native speakers often blend words together, like saying gonna instead of going to. These are things that make your English sound more natural and easier to follow, but you can learn them without trying to sound like someone else. You also need to give your mouth and your brain time to adjust. Speaking a new language involves new muscle movements. If you speak Portuguese, for example, you're used to a certain mouth position. English requires different ones, and that's okay. It takes practice. But that practice should be focused on being understood, not being perfect. There's no medal for perfect imitation, but there's a huge reward in being able to have a conversation, give a presentation, or tell a story with clarity. Sometimes I ask my students this question: would you rather sound native and be misunderstood, or sound like yourself and be clear? Most of them realize that clarity is what they truly want. That's what makes people listen. That's what builds trust. That's what allows your English to grow in real-world situations. So remember this: having an accent is not a mistake. Everyone has an accent, even native speakers. What you want is to make your speech clear, not flawless. Your accent tells a story. It tells people where you come from, what languages you've learned, and what journeys you've taken to be able to speak English today. That story deserves to be heard, and it starts with believing that your voice is already enough. Let's dive into one of the most underrated tools for speaking English clearly: Word stress. I know this isn't something most learners pay attention to in the beginning. We're usually taught vocabulary, grammar, and maybe some pronunciation rules, but very few courses spend enough time showing just how important stress is in English. Words. And yet, getting the stress wrong can lead to confusion, misunderstanding, or even people thinking you're saying a different word entirely. The good news is, once you start to notice word stress, you'll begin to understand and be understood much more easily. First, let's talk about what word stress actually is. In English, most words with more than one syllable have a syllable that is stronger, louder, or longer than the others. That's the stressed syllable. For example, take the word banana. We don't say banana or banana, we say banana, with the stress on the second syllable. If you stress the wrong part of the word, it might not sound right to a native speaker's ear, even if all the individual sounds are correct. I want to share a story with you about Arjun, a learner from Mumbai who had a strong vocabulary and great listening skills. But when he spoke, people sometimes looked confused, not because of his grammar, but because of the way he stressed certain words. For example, in one meeting, he said the word record, but stressed it like record when he meant the noun, which should be record. That little change made people think he was talking about the action of recording something, not the physical item. That's how powerful word stress is. A small shift can change the meaning completely. To help Arjun, we started practicing with word pairs, words that have the same spelling, but different meanings depending on where the stress goes. These are known as heteronyms. Some common examples are record, noun, record, verb, record, present, noun, present, verb, present, and conduct, noun, conduct, verb, conduct. It was a real breakthrough moment for him when he realized he didn't need to learn a brand new word. He just needed to say it differently based on how he was using it in a sentence. Then there's Sophia from Athens. She loved English poetry and read a lot, but she didn't pay attention to how words actually sounded when spoken. In conversation, she would say photograph when she meant photographer, and that stress made the word sound unnatural. Once we broke it down, photograph, photographer, and photographi, she saw the pattern. English often shifts the stress when suffixes are added, and learning those patterns helped her speak more smoothly. She told me she felt like she had unlocked a code, and honestly, that's exactly what it is. English stress follows patterns, and the more you notice them, the easier it becomes to say words naturally. Stress patterns aren't just important for individual words, they're key to sentence rhythm too. But starting with words is the best, first step. One way to build this habit is to use a dictionary that marks word stress with a little apostrophe. For example, the word computer is marked as kemju tattirar. That little mark before PJU tells you it's the stressed syllable. Once you start checking that as part of your vocabulary routine, your awareness of stress improves. Let's try a few simple comparisons together. Imagine someone says insult instead of insult when trying to say someone said something rude. Native speakers will hear that and momentarily pause to figure out what you meant. Or take content, noun, what's inside something, like the content of a box, versus content, adjective, feeling happy or satisfied. Same spelling, different meanings, all because of stress. It's like two completely different words hiding inside one. Another great example is address. If you say AD dress, you're usually talking about a location. If you say address, it means to speak to someone or to deal with an issue. So imagine this sentence. I want to address your concerns. If you accidentally say AD dress, it will sound like you're talking about a street or a number. These little differences can create real confusion, especially in professional settings like interviews, presentations, or meetings. When I worked with Min, a developer from Ho Chi Minh City, we built daily pronunciation drills into his routine that focused just on stress. We'd take 10 words a day and identify the stressed syllable. He'd say each word slowly, then faster, then in a sentence. In just a few weeks, people at work noticed how much more natural his English sounded. He wasn't learning more grammar. He wasn't even adding new words. He was simply improving how he said the words he already knew. Confidence grows quickly when people understand you without asking for repetition. That was the case with Daniela, a public relations consultant from Madrid. Her biggest fear was public, speaking in English. She felt like people didn't take her seriously. But really, the issue was word stress. Her messages were strong. She just wasn't delivering them in a way people were used to hearing. Once she mastered the stress of key words she used often, words like strategy, communication, event, and media, her delivery improved dramatically. Now she speaks at international conferences without that old fear. One thing I tell all my students is this. Clear English is not just about pronunciation of letters. It's about rhythm and music. English has a beat, and the stress patterns are what create that beat. It's why English sounds the way it does. When your word stress is off, the rhythm gets lost, and that's when people struggle to follow you. But when your stress is right, even if your accent is strong, people will understand you easily. And here's something simple you can do today. Take a short paragraph from a book or an article and read it aloud. Before you do, go through it and underline or circle the syllables you think are stressed in longer words. Say the words slowly, exaggerating the stress. It might feel silly at first, but it trains your ear and your mouth. Over time, you'll start to recognize stress naturally, even when you hear new words. The beauty of working on word stress is that you don't need to change your whole accent. You just need to bring more attention to how words are said. And this tiny shift can make a massive difference in how confident you feel and how well others understand you. Word stress is not just a pronunciation tip, it's a communication superpower. When we talk about sounding natural in English, most people think about pronunciation or accent. But there's something even more powerful that often goes unnoticed. Sentence stress and rhythm. This is one of the most magical parts of speaking English fluently, and once you understand it, your speech becomes easier to follow, more engaging, and much more like what native speakers expect to hear. Today, I want to help you understand how this works and how you can use it to sound more confident and fluent when you speak. Let's start with something simple. English is a stress-timed language. That means some syllables are stressed more than others. And those stressed syllables tend to come at regular intervals, like a beat in music. The unstressed syllables get squeezed in between. This creates a kind of rhythm. If you've ever felt that English sounds a bit like a song or a drum beat, this is why. And it's not random. There's a pattern. The words that carry the most meaning usually get stressed. These are often the content words, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. On the other hand, function words like prepositions, articles, and auxiliary verbs are usually not stressed. Let me give you an example. Take the sentence, I want to go to the store. A native speaker is likely to stress it like this. I want to go to the store. The stress lands on want, go, and store, because those words carry the most meaning. The other words, I, to, and thee, are reduced and said quickly. That rhythm gives the sentence a natural flow. But if you stress every word equally, it can sound robotic or unnatural. Some learners, especially beginners, do this without realizing. They say, "I want to go to the store," with equal emphasis on every word. It's clear, but it's not how English is usually spoken. I remember a student I worked with from Istanbul named Elif. She was dedicated and had spent years studying grammar and vocabulary. Her pronunciation of individual words was quite good, but when she spoke in full sentences, something felt a bit off. People understood her, but her speech lacked rhythm, and it made her sound less confident than she really was. She told me she felt frustrated because she had worked so hard, but still felt like her English didn't sound fluent. So we started focusing on sentence stress. We recorded her reading short sentences, and then we listened to how native speakers said the same phrases. We broke down which words were stressed and which were reduced. At first, it was strange for her. She felt like she was swallowing some words or saying them too quickly. But after just a week of practicing stress patterns, her speech started to change. She began to speak with more rhythm, and suddenly her confidence grew. She wasn't adding new vocabulary or changing her grammar. She was simply using the rhythm of English in a more natural way. To help Elif, I gave her some practical exercises that you can try too. One of the most effective was shadowing. She would listen to short clips of natural spoken English, like from a podcast or video, and repeat what she heard at the same time, copying not just the words, but the rhythm and stress. This helped her internalize the natural patterns of speech. At first, she chose slower speakers, but over time, she built up to faster ones. After a few weeks, even her friends noticed the difference. Her speech sounded smoother and more relaxed, and she no longer felt like she had to think about every single word before saying it. Another great exercise was marking stress in sentences. We'd take a simple sentence like, "She's been working on that project for months," and figure out the stressed words. She's been working on that project for months. The most important content words get the emphasis, and the rhythm naturally follows. Once you start doing this, you'll hear it everywhere, in movies, podcasts, conversations. You'll begin to recognize the beat of English, and it becomes much easier to follow and produce fluent speech. Sentence stress also helps your listeners understand you better. When you stress the right words, you guide your listener through your sentence. You show them what's important. If you stress the wrong words, your message can become confusing, or your tone might seem strange. For example, imagine someone says, "I didn't say you stole the money." That sentence can have many meanings depending on which word is stressed. If you stress "I," it means someone else said it. If you stress "didn't," it means you're denying it. If you stress "you," it means someone else stole it. So sentence stress isn't just about rhythm, it's about meaning and emotion. I also worked with a student named Jorge from Buenos Aires, who was preparing for job interviews in English. His vocabulary was advanced, and his grammar was nearly perfect, but his answers felt rehearsed and flat. We realized he was stressing the wrong words in long sentences, especially under pressure. So we practiced common interview answers, focusing just on which words to stress. He learned to highlight the key ideas in his answers by stressing them naturally. After practicing this way, his answers came alive. He no longer sounded like he was reading from a script. Instead, he sounded confident and conversational. If you want to improve your sentence stress, start small. Choose a few sentences you use often and say them out loud slowly, paying attention to the keywords. Don't try to rush. Focus on getting the rhythm right. Then, gradually increase your speed. Another tip is to record yourself. When you listen back, ask yourself, did I stress the most important words? Did the sentence have a natural rhythm? Comparing your version with a native speaker's version is a powerful way to learn. Reading aloud with rhythm is another fun way to practice. Children's books, poetry, or song lyrics can help you feel the beat of English. Some learners find it helpful to tap their hand or foot while they speak to keep the beat steady. This might sound silly, but it's surprisingly effective. Your body starts to feel the rhythm, and soon it becomes more natural in your speech. What I love most about sentence stress and rhythm is that it gives life to your language. It's the difference between speaking words and communicating a message, and it's something that learners at any level can start working on right away. You don't need a perfect accent to sound natural. You just need to develop a sense of the beat. And once you do, your English won't just be correct, it will sound alive. Silent letters are one of the sneakiest parts of English pronunciation. They hide inside words and catch learners by surprise. You look at a word, you see a certain number of letters, and your brain naturally wants to pronounce all of them. But in English, that's not how it works. There are many words where some letters are written, but not spoken. Today, I want to help you deal with these silent letters in a simple, practical way, so that you can pronounce words correctly and confidently, without falling into the trap of trying to pronounce everything you see. Let's start by understanding why silent letters exist. A lot of English words come from other languages: Latin, French, Greek, even Old English. Over time, the way we pronounce words has changed, but the spelling often stayed the same. That's why you see words like night or island, where letters like K and S are silent. They were once pronounced hundreds of years ago, but now they're not. So we're left with spellings that look one way, but sound another. And for learners, that can be incredibly confusing. I remember working with Amir, a learner from Dubai, who was confident in grammar and vocabulary, but constantly struggled with words like honest, knife, and debt. He kept saying the H in honest, the K in knife, and the B in debt. It made him feel frustrated, because he thought he was doing everything right. When we talked, I asked him, "What do you do when you see a silent letter in a word?" And he said, "I just try to say everything, because I don't want to skip anything by mistake." That's a common response, but it usually makes pronunciation less natural. So we worked together on a better strategy. The first thing I helped Amir do was create a silent letter alert system. That means he started keeping a list of words with silent letters that gave him trouble. Every time he found a new one, he added it to the list. But more importantly, he didn't just write the word. He also wrote the correct pronunciation using a simple phonetic spelling, like knife, arsh, knife, honest, arsh, honest, and debt, arsh, debt. We made it fun. He recorded himself saying the words, listened to how native speakers said them, and then practiced again. In just a few weeks, his pronunciation improved, and his confidence grew. Here's the thing. You don't need to learn all the silent letters at once. But if you start noticing them, little by little, they'll become easier to handle. Let's look at some common patterns. One of the most common silent letters is K at the beginning of a word before N. Words like no, knee, knife, and knock all have a silent K. You never say ku now or ku knife. The K is completely silent. Once you know this rule, you can apply it every time you see that pattern. Another common one is the silent B after M. Words like thumb, comb, lamb, and bomb have a silent B. Again, you don't say thumba or bamboo. Just say the word without the B sound. This rule is very helpful, especially with everyday words. Then there's the silent L in words like walk, talk, calm, and half. A lot of learners want to say the L clearly, but in natural English that L disappears. So it's walk, not wolk. This one takes practice because your brain sees the L and wants to use it. But once you start listening closely, you'll hear that native speakers don't pronounce it. And don't forget about the silent H in words like honest, hour, and air. This one confuses people because H is usually pronounced. But in these cases, it's not. So you say honest, not honest. This pattern mostly appears in a few specific words, so it's easier to memorize as a small group. I also want to mention the W in right, wrist, and wrong. These words come from Old English, where the W was once spoken. Today, we don't say by right or double wrist. We just say right and wrist. This can be surprising if your native language always pronounces every letter. Now, here's a useful tip. When you're reading and you see a new word, don't assume you know how it sounds just by looking at the spelling. If you're not sure, check a dictionary with audio or use a pronunciation tool online. This helps you connect the spelling with the correct sound. Over time, you'll start to notice the same patterns repeating, and it will feel more natural. Another student I worked with, Marina from Warsaw, used flashcards to master silent letters. On one side, she wrote the word exactly as it appears: knock, thumb, calm. On the other side, she wrote how it's pronounced and added a sample sentence. She practiced a few cards each day, reading them aloud. This helped her train her brain to see the correct pronunciation even when the spelling was tricky. One more thing that helps is listening practice. Try to focus on real conversations, podcasts, interviews, shows, and listen for words with silent letters. You'll start to notice how native speakers naturally skip certain sounds. That's when your pronunciation will start to change. You'll stop saying extra sounds, and your English will sound cleaner and clearer. And here's something I always remind my students: silent letters are not there to trick you. They're part of the history of English. And while they can be confusing, at first, they become much easier with exposure and repetition. The more you read, listen, and speak, the more familiar these patterns will feel. Sometimes learners ask me, should I memorize a list of all silent letters? And I say no. That's overwhelming. It's better to focus on high-frequency words, the ones you use every day. Master those first. Words like no, right, honest, thumb, walk. These appear all the time, and once you're comfortable with them, you'll gain more confidence. Then, when you meet a new word with a silent letter, you'll recognize the pattern and handle it more easily. Just like Amir and Marina, you can improve your pronunciation by paying attention to these silent letters. You don't have to change your accent or sound exactly like a native speaker. But when you drop the sounds that aren't supposed to be there, your speech becomes clearer and smoother. That's what makes people listen more closely and understand you without effort. It's not about perfection. It's about being smart with what you say and how you say it. And silent letters are just one small step toward sounding more natural. In English. One of the biggest reasons English can sound so fast and hard to follow is because of something called linking. When native speakers talk, they don't pronounce each word separately like you would see them written on a page. Instead, they connect words together, letting one sound flow into the next. This creates a smooth, natural rhythm. But for learners, it can feel like all the words are melting into one long sound. Today, I want to help you understand how linking works, why it happens, and most importantly, how you can practice it to sound more natural and understand spoken English more easily. Remember a student I worked with from Istanbul? Her name was Elif, and she had been studying English for years. She had great vocabulary and grammar, and she could read and write well. But whenever she tried to follow a native speaker's conversation, she felt lost. "They speak too fast," she told me. But the real problem wasn't the speed. It was the way words were connected. Once we started practicing linking, she began to understand much more, and even started using those same patterns in her own speaking. So, what exactly is linking? Linking happens when the final sound of one word connects to the first sound of the next word. It often involves consonants joining with vowels, or vowels blending into other vowels. Let's start with a simple example. The phrase, "go on." If you pronounce it slowly and clearly, it sounds like go on. But in fast natural speech, it becomes go one. That little W sound in the middle isn't a separate word. It's just a bridge between the vowel sounds in go and on. English speakers use these bridges to keep the flow of speech smooth. Another common case is consonant to vowel linking. Take the phrase, "pick it up." A learner might say it as 3 separate words, pick any up. But a native speaker would link the final consonant of pick to the next word, making it sound like pick it up. It becomes one continuous stream. The listener hears the message clearly because it flows in a way that's natural for English. Now imagine you're learning English and you hear someone say, "Did you eat?" It might sound like one strange word, but it's actually just "did you eat" linked together. The D in did connects to you, and you connects to eat. Instead of did you eat, it's did you eat? This is something learners often miss when they only study individual words. But in real conversation, this kind of linking happens all the time. Another example is the phrase "turn it off." In slow speech, you can hear every word clearly. But in connected speech, it becomes "turn it off." The N links to it, and then it links to off. So what you hear is "turn it off," almost like one long word. When you start recognizing these patterns, your listening skills will improve, and you'll also be able to mimic that natural flow in your speaking. One very common linking sound involves inserting a W or a Y between vowels. For instance, go on becomes go one, and I am becomes I am. These are not official letters being added to your sentence. They are smooth connectors that help avoid a break between 2 vowels. Think of it as glue between the words. English doesn't like abrupt gaps in speech, so these linking sounds are a way to make transitions feel smoother. I worked with a learner from Milan named Luca, who was great at writing, but he spoke with noticeable pauses between words. He would say things like, "She is a doctor." It was clear, but it sounded robotic and slow. I explained to him that in English, we link those words so it becomes "she's a doctor." We practice several simple phrases like "what are you doing?" which becomes "what you doin'," or "I don't know," which turns into "I don't know." Of course, this is informal, and it depends on context, but understanding how the rhythm of speech changes helped him sound much more fluent and less mechanical. One of the best ways to practice linking is through shadowing. That means you listen to a short piece of natural speech, just a few seconds, and repeat it immediately, copying the rhythm, the intonation, and how the words are connected. Don't worry about getting every word perfect at first. Just focus on the flow. You can find short clips from interviews, podcasts, or movies, and repeat them again and again. Over time, your brain and mouth will get used to the patterns. Another practical method is reading out loud with linking in mind. Take a simple sentence like, "He has a lot of time," and instead of saying each word separately, try saying it as a connected phrase. He has a lot of time. You can even exaggerate the connections at first, just to train your ears and tongue. Then gradually say it more naturally. One more thing I often suggest is listening to how children's shows or beginner-level English content link words together. These materials are often slower, but still use linking. You can clearly hear how words join in sentences like, "Let's go outside," which becomes "let's gootside." By starting with these simpler examples, you can build your foundation before jumping into faster, more complex conversations. Now, I know some learners worry that if they start linking too much, they'll become hard to understand. But actually, the opposite is true. Proper linking makes your speech smoother and easier for native speakers to follow. The key is to be intentional about it. Don't mumble. Make sure each word is still clear, but let them connect naturally, the way they do in real conversations. When I coached Carla from São Paulo, she was worried about sounding unnatural when trying to copy how native speakers talk. She said, "It doesn't feel like me." I told her that she didn't have to change who she is. She just needed to learn the music of English, and linking is a big part of that music. We practiced together with simple sentences, and soon she noticed people were responding to her more easily in meetings at work. She was still Carla, but now she was speaking with a more natural flow. Linking is not about rushing or speaking fast. It's about speaking smoothly. Even if you speak slowly, you can still use linking. Instead of saying, "What is your name?" you can say, "What's your name?" The words are still there, but the connection makes it sound more fluid. This helps with both fluency and comprehension. I encourage you to start noticing linking in everything you hear in English. Pay attention when watching a movie or listening to a podcast. Try writing down short phrases and marking the parts where words connect. Practice saying them aloud. And most of all, be patient with yourself. Linking may feel strange at first, but with practice, it becomes automatic. The goal is not to sound like someone else, but to express yourself clearly and naturally. When you use linking, you're speaking the way English is actually spoken, and that makes all the difference. Whether you're in a casual conversation or giving a presentation, mastering linking will make your speech feel more confident, smooth, and easy to understand. One of the most fascinating parts of learning English or any language is realizing that not all sounds exist in every language. You might think that pronunciation is just a matter of copying what you hear, but it goes much deeper than that. Our mouths, tongues, and brains are trained from a young age to recognize and produce certain sounds. So when we're introduced to new ones, sounds that don't exist in our native language, it can feel confusing or even impossible at first. But I want to tell you something important. It's completely normal. And more importantly, it's something you can overcome with awareness, practice, and the right strategies. I remember a student from Paris named Mark. He was a lawyer who needed to use English for international cases. He spoke fluently and had a solid command of vocabulary and grammar. But there was one sound that always gave him trouble, the English th. You know the sound in words like think and that. In French, there's no equivalent sound. So Mark would often replace think with sink, or that with zat. At first, he was frustrated because people would sometimes ask him to repeat himself. It affected his confidence. But once we broke it down, he realized the issue wasn't his accent. It was this unfamiliar sound that he needed to train his mouth to produce. The English th sound can be tricky for so many learners. It doesn't exist in Japanese, Arabic, French, or many other languages. That means the tongue has to do something new. It has to gently touch the upper teeth and allow air to flow out. It's a strange feeling if you're not used to it. But when Mark started practicing it slowly, exaggerating the movement of his tongue, and using a mirror to check his placement, he began to improve. I had him say pairs of words like think and sink, this and dis, so he could feel the difference. And little by little, it became more natural. Not perfect, but clear enough that people no longer misunderstood him. Another student I'll never forget was Aiko from Tokyo. Her challenge was with the L and R sounds in English. In Japanese, those sounds don't exist as separate phonemes. There's a single sound that falls somewhere in between, and it's very different from the English pronunciation. So for her, words like rice and lice, or light, and right sounded almost identical. This caused confusion, especially in professional settings. She told me about a meeting where she said, "I love my new lead," and someone thought she meant read. It embarrassed her, but she used that experience as motivation to improve. What we did together was work on strengthening the tongue and ear. I recorded her saying minimal pairs, word pairs where only one sound is different, like road and load and glass and grass. Then she would listen back and try to hear the difference. At the same time, she practiced tongue placement. For R, the tongue pulls back without touching the top of the mouth. For L, the tongue touches just behind the upper teeth. We made it physical, not just mental. With time and consistent effort, she could say, "I really like reading," with clarity. The look on her face when people stopped asking her to repeat herself was unforgettable. She felt heard, understood, and proud of herself. And then there was Omar from Cairo. Arabic is his native language, and while he had great command of English vocabulary, there were certain vowel sounds that just didn't exist in his speech patterns. For instance, the difference between ship and sheep was difficult. In Arabic, vowel lengths and shifts are different, and many sounds in English just don't have direct counterparts. So when Omar said, "I saw a ship," it sometimes sounded like sheep, which led to a few funny misunderstandings. He laughed it off, but he really wanted to improve. We worked on identifying vowel positions in the mouth. I had him stretch the sounds and feel the difference between I as in bit and E as in beat. We recorded his voice, compared it to native pronunciation, and used physical gestures to match vowel lengths, like stretching a rubber band to feel the difference in sound length. He also watched videos with subtitles to match the sound and spelling. Little by little, his ears got sharper, and his pronunciation got clearer. And when he said, "I saw a ship sailing in the sea," no one thought he was talking about sheep anymore. These stories are not about achieving perfect accents. They're about awareness. If you're struggling with a sound, it's not because you're bad at English. It's usually because that sound doesn't exist in your native language. It's like asking someone to perform a dance move they've never seen before. First, they need to watch it, then break it into steps, then practice it slowly until it feels more natural. Your mouth is learning new choreography. So what can you do if you notice that certain sounds in English just don't seem to come out right? The first step is to identify them. Pay attention to what people often ask you to repeat. Listen to native speakers and notice which words feel difficult to say or understand. Make a list of those words and look for patterns. Are there certain sounds you avoid? Do you tend to replace them with something else that feels easier? Next, record yourself. I can't stress this enough. When you hear yourself from the outside, you notice things you don't catch while speaking. Compare your recording to a native speaker's version. Don't judge yourself. Just observe. Where is the difference? Is it the mouth position, the timing, the length of the vowel? Then, practice in isolation. Don't try to fix everything at once. Pick one sound and work on it daily for 5 minutes. Use minimal pairs, repeat keywords, and use your phone or a mirror to check your mouth movements. If possible, work with a teacher or language partner who can give you feedback. And always, always be patient with yourself. Your brain and body are adapting to something completely new. That takes time. The good news is that even small improvements make a big difference. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be clear enough to be understood. When you face sounds that don't exist in your language, don't avoid them. Get curious about them. Make it a game. Break it down. Laugh at the mistakes. Celebrate the small wins. I've seen students from all over the world, Paris, Tokyo, Cairo, and beyond, turn their pronunciation struggles into strengths, simply by facing the sounds that once scared them. You can do the same. When you bring awareness to the sounds that don't exist in your language, you open a new door in your English journey. It's a challenge, yes, but it's also an opportunity to grow in ways you didn't expect. One of the most powerful and underrated tools for improving your English pronunciation is something incredibly simple: recording yourself and listening back. I know that might sound uncomfortable or even awkward, especially at first. Most of us aren't used to hearing our own voices, and when we do, we tend to focus on how strange we sound. But that discomfort is actually a sign that you're about to grow. Because the moment you hear yourself from the outside, you begin to notice things you would never catch while speaking. That's where real improvement starts. When we speak, we're focused on our thoughts, the vocabulary, the grammar, the flow of what we're saying. Our brain is doing a lot at once. It's like trying to edit a photo while you're still taking it. But when you record yourself, you give your brain the chance to step back and really see the image. Or in this case, to hear the details. You hear the stress, the rhythm, the sounds that might not be clear, the ones that are too soft or emphasized in the wrong way. And most importantly, you start to recognize the gap between what you think you're saying and what you're actually saying. Let me tell you about a listener named Anya from Berlin. She reached out to me through a message, saying that she had been learning English for over 10 years, and while she could read and write very well, she always felt a block when it came to speaking. She said her pronunciation didn't sound natural, and people would sometimes ask her to repeat things. She didn't know exactly what was going wrong, just that her English didn't sound the way she wanted it to. So I suggested she start recording herself. Just her voice, nothing complicated. I asked her to pick a short paragraph every day, something from a podcast, a news article, or even her favorite book, and read it out loud while recording. At first, she was shocked by how she sounded. She said, "That doesn't sound like me." But that was the moment things started to change, because now she had a mirror for her voice. She could hear where her pronunciation was flat, where her rhythm didn't match natural English, where her intonation was too stiff, or where certain vowel sounds were unclear. She didn't have to guess anymore. The evidence was right there. She began a simple routine. Every morning before work, she recorded herself reading for 5 minutes. Then she listened back, sometimes with the original audio if she was shadowing, a podcast or video. She would take notes on the parts that sounded different. At times, she would repeat the same sentence multiple times until she got closer to what she heard in native speech. Her goal wasn't to sound like someone else. It was to speak more clearly, more confidently, and more naturally. After a few weeks, she noticed something remarkable. In meetings at work, She was being interrupted less. People understood her more easily. She wasn't second-guessing herself as much. She even started to enjoy speaking English instead of avoiding it. The turning point wasn't just the practice. It was the awareness that came from listening to her own voice and working with what she heard. What makes this technique so effective is that it puts you in control. You don't need a teacher in the room. You don't need expensive tools. All you need is a phone or computer with a microphone and the willingness to try. By recording your voice and listening back, you become your own coach. You start to hear what others hear. And that awareness alone can improve your pronunciation more than hours of passive listening. I often tell learners to focus on small sections of speech, 1 or 2 sentences at a time. Don't try to fix everything at once. Maybe today you notice that your R sound is too soft, so you work on that. Tomorrow, you notice that your sentence stress is flat, so you work on adding rhythm. It's a process, and each recording becomes a snapshot of your progress. You'll be amazed at how different you sound after just a month of consistent practice. Another benefit of recording yourself is that it trains your ear as much as your mouth. When you listen to yourself, you start comparing your sounds to natural English. That comparison helps you sharpen your listening skills, which improves your speaking in return. It's a full circle effect. You speak, you listen, you improve. Then you speak again, but now with better awareness. If you're not sure where to start, try this. Choose a short script, something like, "Today I'm going to the market to buy some vegetables. I hope the weather stays nice." Say it naturally, record it, then listen. Ask yourself, did I stress the important words? Do my vowels sound right? Did I speak too fast or too slow? Don't worry about perfection. Focus on clarity and expression. If possible, compare your version with a native speaker saying the same sentence. Use a video or a podcast as a model. Some learners even like to do shadowing, where they listen to a sentence, pause the audio, and immediately repeat it while trying to match the rhythm and tone. This is a fantastic technique, and if you record yourself while doing it, you can really see how close you're getting. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's also helpful to keep your recordings organized. Maybe create a folder on your phone or computer and label each file with the date. That way you can go back and listen to earlier recordings and hear your progress. Nothing is more motivating than realizing how much clearer and more confident you've become. I've had students bring me recordings from a month ago and say, "I can't believe I sounded like that." And I always remind them, that's growth. That's the result of your effort. The important thing to remember is that your voice is your tool. Like any tool, it needs tuning. And tuning comes from attention. Recording yourself isn't about being critical. It's about being curious. What are you doing well? What can you improve? How does your English feel to you? Once you start answering those questions with real examples, your learning becomes faster and deeper. Recording yourself is not just for pronunciation either. It helps with fluency, with confidence, with the ability to self-correct. It makes you a more independent learner, and that's something I always want to encourage. Because English isn't just something you study, it's something you live, speak, and share with the world. Anya from Berlin didn't have any special talent. She just decided to take her learning into her own hands. And that simple decision to start recording her voice completely changed the way she spoke. You can do the same. All it takes is that first recording. Yes, it might feel strange. Yes, you might cringe at your voice. But stay with it. What feels uncomfortable today will become your superpower tomorrow. Shadowing is one of my favorite techniques to recommend because it's simple, powerful, and works well for learners at any level. If you've never heard of it before, let me explain. Shadowing is when you listen to spoken English, like a podcast, video, or audio clip, and you repeat what you hear immediately after, almost like an echo. The key is to match the speaker's rhythm, tone, and pronunciation as closely as possible. It's not just about repeating words, it's about copying the music of the language. That includes intonation, stress, and even the pauses. And while it might sound a little intense at first, shadowing is one of the fastest ways to train your brain and mouth to work together more naturally in English. I often describe it like this. You're learning to dance with the language. At wai, first, you're following the lead of your partner, trying to stay in step. But over time, your body starts to memorize the moves. You're not just watching, you're participating. And the more you participate, the more natural your pronunciation becomes. Let me tell you about Mira, a listener from Mumbai. She's been studying English for years and can speak fluently, but she always felt that her pronunciation wasn't where she wanted it to be. She told me she sounded too textbook, and even though people understood her, she felt self-conscious when speaking in professional settings. She wanted to sound more natural, not because she wanted to hide her identity, but because she wanted to feel more confident and clear when expressing herself. I suggested shadowing, starting with just 15 minutes a day. She chose a few English podcasts and YouTube videos that she enjoyed, topics she was genuinely interested in, like personal development and tech reviews. Each morning she would pick a short section, maybe just 30 seconds to 1 minute of audio. She listened once or twice, then played it again and began shadowing, repeating right after the speaker, trying to match everything from sentence stress to the tiny linking sounds between words. At first it was hard. She stumbled. Her tongue didn't want to cooperate. She had to slow down and repeat certain lines over and over. But she didn't stop. She kept going every day. After a week, she said something surprising. She could feel the words moving more easily in her mouth. Her tongue and lips started to follow the rhythm more naturally. She wasn't just repeating sounds anymore. She was feeling them. Shadowing helped Mira develop a kind of muscle memory. Her mouth became used to forming sounds in a new way, and she noticed that when she spoke spontaneously in meetings or casual conversations, her speech was smoother and more confident. She was no longer translating in her head or second-guessing how to pronounce things. Her ears and mouth were finally working together. That's the beauty of shadowing. It's active listening and speaking combined. You're training your ear to pick up the details of pronunciation while training your mouth to reproduce them in real time. It forces your brain to pay close attention to how native speakers actually speak, not just what they say, but how they say it. And that's where real progress happens. One important thing I always tell learners is that you don't need to understand every single word in the beginning. Shadowing is not a vocabulary test. It's a pronunciation workout. So if you come across a sentence where you don't know a word, that's okay. Focus on how the speaker says it. Try to match their sound. The meaning will come later. And often, hearing the word repeatedly in context helps you remember it more easily than reading it in a textbook. Another tip I gave Mira was to shadow in front of a mirror. That way, she could watch how her mouth moved and compare it to the speaker if a video was available. Watching your own facial expressions while shadowing can help you spot small habits that might be holding you back, like not opening your mouth enough for certain vowels or keeping your lips too tight during certain sounds. These small adjustments make a big difference in how your speech sounds to others. Mira also started recording her shadowing sessions. She would play a sentence from her favorite podcast, shadow it, and then record her own version. Later, she'd listen back and compare. Sometimes she heard a big difference, and other times, she was pleasantly surprised to hear how close she had come to the original. It became a daily habit that not only improved her pronunciation, but also made her feel proud of her progress. Shadowing is flexible too. You don't need to do it for an hour. Even 5 or 10 minutes can make a difference. The most important thing is consistency. When you repeat the process day after day, your brain starts to internalize the sound patterns of English. You'll notice that your speaking becomes more fluid. You won't hesitate as much, and that dreaded feeling of not sounding natural will start to fade. You can also adjust the speed. Some learners like to slow down the audio at first using tools or apps that reduce the playback speed. That's perfectly fine. The goal is to be accurate, not fast. Speed will come later. Start slowly, match the sounds carefully, then gradually increase the speed as you become more comfortable. One mistake I see people make is thinking they can only shadow formal or scripted content. But actually, shadowing casual conversations can be even more helpful. Real-life English is full of reductions, contractions, and connected speech, those natural features that can be hard to learn from textbooks. So don't be afraid to shadow movie dialogues, interviews, or even vlogs. The more variety, the better your exposure to different rhythms and accents. The impact shadowing had on Mira's confidence was incredible. After 2 months, she sent me a voice message. Her pronunciation had improved so much, and her speech had this new rhythm. It was smooth, expressive, and clear. And more importantly, she sounded like herself. That's what shadowing gives you. Not a new voice, but your voice. More fluent and natural. If you've never tried shadowing before, I encourage you to start today. Choose something short and interesting. Focus on how the speaker delivers the message, not just the message itself. Repeat, listen, and adjust. Make it part of your daily routine. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep showing up. Because every time you shadow a sentence, you're training your brain, your ears, and your mouth to speak English with more ease and confidence. That's the kind of progress that sticks. One of the most overlooked aspects of improving English pronunciation is understanding how physical it really is. I know we often think of language as something that happens in the mind, vocabulary, grammar, sentence structure. But when it comes to pronunciation, it's just as much about your mouth, your tongue, your lips, and how they move. Speaking English clearly requires training these muscles in new ways, especially if your native language uses very different sounds. I've worked with so many learners who had great grammar and vocabulary, but still struggled to be understood. When we looked closely, the issue was almost always physical. Their mouth simply wasn't used to making the shapes needed for certain English sounds. That's completely normal. Think about it. If you've been speaking your native language your entire life, your mouth has built a habit, a muscle memory for those sounds. Switching to English means retraining those muscles to move differently. Let me tell you about Mateo, a learner from Buenos Aires. He spoke English quite fluently, and his grammar was solid, but when he spoke, he felt like his words were getting stuck. He told me, "I know the words, I just can't say them right." He had a slight mumbling quality, and some vowel sounds weren't coming out clearly. People understood him, but he didn't feel confident, especially in meetings with international clients. We started with something very simple. I asked him to say a few basic English words, like cat, bed, dog, and boot, while looking in the mirror. He was surprised at how different the shapes of his mouth needed to be, especially compared to how he spoke in Spanish. The us in cat made his mouth open wider than he was used to. The use in boot required more lip rounding. And the use in think felt completely foreign, because Spanish doesn't use that sound at all. I explained to Mateo that improving pronunciation would mean going back to basics. Not just listening and repeating, but watching how his mouth moved and physically training those movements. I gave him a set of exercises to practice daily in front of the mirror. The eyes mirror is a powerful tool because it gives you visual feedback. You can see if your lips are rounding, if your tongue is sticking out too much, or if your jaw is dropping enough for those open vowel sounds. He started practicing about 10 minutes, every morning. He'd stand in front of his bathroom mirror and say short sentences out loud, exaggerating the movements at first. Things like, "I need to buy a new phone," or, "The weather is getting better." At first it felt strange. He told me it was like acting, like putting on a mask. But within a week, he started to notice small changes. His lips felt more flexible. His tongue moved more easily. He began to enjoy it. I also encouraged him to isolate difficult sounds and practice them on their own. For example, the th-ta sound in think and thank you was one of his biggest challenges. I asked him to place his tongue gently between his teeth, blow air softly, and say th repeatedly. Then we added it to words. Think, thought, through. It was slow work, but the repetition paid off. After a couple of weeks, that once difficult sound became natural for him. The R sound was another one. In Spanish, the R is made with a flap of the tongue. But English, R, is made by curling the tongue slightly and pulling it back, without touching the roof of the mouth. It's a completely different movement. Mateo practiced in front of the mirror, saying red, really, and right over and over, watching the shape of his mouth and focusing on that curl. It took time, but it worked. One exercise I love to recommend, and that Mateo used daily, is something I call the mirror script. You take a short paragraph, or even just a few lines of dialogue from a movie, and you perform it like an actor. You focus on exaggerating the mouth movements while staying as close to natural English pronunciation as possible. You watch your facial expressions, your lip movements, your jaw. You become aware of how your face contributes to the sound. Mateo recorded himself once a week and listened back. He said that hearing his voice improved gave him a huge boost of motivation. What used to sound flat and unclear was now more rhythmic, more alive. His vowels were clearer, his consonants sharper. Most importantly, he felt in control of his speech. His mouth wasn't fighting him anymore. It had learned how to support the sounds he wanted to make. What I find amazing about this kind of physical training is that it also helps with confidence. When your mouth knows what to do, your brain relaxes. You don't overthink every word. You start to trust yourself. And that trust is what makes your speaking sound more natural. I want to remind you that this kind of training isn't about trying to erase your accent or sound exactly like a native speaker. It's about clarity. It's about making your message easy to understand. When your mouth is trained to produce English sounds clearly, people don't have to strain to understand you. You don't have to repeat yourself. and that makes every conversation smoother and more enjoyable. You can start small. Choose 3 or 4 words that are hard for you to pronounce. Look them up in a good online dictionary with audio and practice saying them slowly while watching your mouth in the mirror. Focus on the shape of your lips, how open your mouth is, where your tongue is placed. Then move on to short sentences, and finally try longer phrases. Consistency is key. 10 minutes a day will make a bigger difference than an hour once a week. Think of it like physical exercise. You wouldn't expect your body to become flexible overnight. The same goes for your mouth. The more you move it in the right ways, the easier it becomes. You're building strength and coordination in muscles you've probably never paid attention to before. And if you feel silly doing these exercises, that's totally okay. Most learners do it first, but that feeling fades quickly when you start to notice real improvement. Like Matteo, you'll go from, "I can't say that right," to, "That actually sounded good." And over time, those small daily efforts will transform the way you speak and the way you feel about your English. So remember, pronunciation isn't just mental, it's physical. And the more you train your mouth, your lips, and your tongue, the more control you gain over your speaking. You're not just learning English, you're learning to perform it, to shape it, to own it. That's a powerful shift, and it starts with just a mirror and a few minutes of your time. One of the most important steps to improving your English pronunciation is learning to listen before you speak. It might sound obvious, but many learners jump straight into trying to speak without really training their ears first. When I say listening before speaking, I mean active listening, paying close attention not just to words, but to how those words are pronounced, the rhythm, the stress, and the melody of the language. Listening carefully is the foundation of good pronunciation because you can only produce what you've accurately heard. If you don't train your ear, your mouth won't know what to do. I remember working with a learner named Hana from Tokyo. She was very motivated to speak English, but often felt frustrated because people didn't always understand her. When we talked about her listening habits, I realized she mostly listened to English in a passive way, sometimes music in the background or watching movies without subtitles. While these are good activities, they don't develop the kind of focused listening needed to improve pronunciation. I encouraged Hana to practice active listening, which means really focusing on the sounds and patterns of English when you hear it. Active listening is more than just hearing words. It means noticing the small details that make English sound natural. For example, listening for how native speakers connect words or where they put stress in a sentence. If you don't hear these things, it's hard to reproduce them. When Hana started practicing this way, she noticed things she never realized before, like how the word going to often sounds like gonna in fast speech. She also started picking up on the rise and fall of intonation in questions versus statements. These details are what make your English sound natural and clear. Another learner, Luca from Milan, told me that he always struggled with the hut sounds, like in think and that. When he focused on listening closely, especially to podcasts and conversations, he began to hear exactly how those sounds were made. His mouth was able to follow because his ear was trained first. Without good listening skills, his tongue didn't know what shape to take, so the sounds were unclear. But by slowing down and listening carefully, Luca's pronunciation improved quickly. Listening also helps you internalize the rhythm of English. English is a stress-timed language, meaning some syllables are longer and louder than others, creating a natural rhythm. If you listen actively, you'll start to feel this rhythm in your head and then in your mouth when you speak. One of my students from Istanbul, Aylin, said she started to enjoy English more after she focused on listening to podcasts and repeating phrases. She noticed the music of English and how some words were shorter or linked together. This helped her feel more comfortable when she spoke, even if she made mistakes. She was matching her speech to what she heard, and that made her sound clearer. I always tell learners that improving pronunciation is like learning to play a musical instrument. You need to listen to the music carefully before you can play it. Well, if you don't know what a note sounds like, you won't be able to hit it. The same goes for English sounds. When you listen carefully, your brain builds a mental map of the sounds and patterns, and your mouth can follow that map when you speak. One practical way to practice active listening is to choose short clips from podcasts, movies, or interviews, and listen to them several times. The first time, just listen for understanding. The second time, listen carefully to the pronunciation and intonation. Try to notice which words are stressed and which are weak or connected. You can even write down what you hear and compare it with the transcript if available. This trains your ear and sharpens your awareness. Another tip is to use subtitles wisely. Sometimes, subtitles in your native language can distract you from really listening to English. Try turning on English subtitles or no subtitles at all and focus on the sounds. If you don't understand everything, that's okay. The goal is to train your ear, not to get every word right at first. Listening before speaking also means paying attention to your own voice when you practice. When you record yourself, play it back and compare it to native speakers. What do you notice? Are you missing some sounds? Is your stress pattern different? Listening carefully to yourself can be just as powerful as listening to others. I want you to think about how much English you hear every day. Are you listening actively or passively? Are you noticing how native speakers connect words or how they stress certain syllables? The more you listen with intention, the more you build the foundation for clear pronunciation. It might feel slow at first, but with regular practice, you'll start to hear sounds and patterns you never noticed before. And when that happens, your speaking will naturally improve. So, before you focus on speaking fast or perfect grammar, spend time listening deeply. Train your ear like a musician tuning their instrument. This is the secret many learners overlook, but it's one of the most powerful ways to improve your pronunciation. It's simple, it's practical, and it works. Listening carefully before speaking will give you the confidence and clarity you need to communicate effectively in English. I want to start this part by telling you something very important that many English learners forget. Your goal is not to sound perfect, but to be understood. When you're learning English, it's easy to get caught up in trying to imitate native speakers perfectly, trying to eliminate every little accent or mistake. But the truth is, perfection is not the goal. Communication and connection are. I know this because I have worked with so many learners from all over the world who struggled with this same idea. One story that really sticks with me is about a woman named Niran from Bangkok. Niran came to me feeling discouraged. She told me that she had spent years trying to get rid of her Thai accent and trying to sound like a native English speaker. She practiced for hours every day, repeating sounds and phrases until she was exhausted. But the more she focused on sounding perfect, the more anxious and frustrated she became. She felt like she was never good enough. She even stopped speaking English at times because she was afraid people wouldn't understand her or would judge her accent. One day, we had a long conversation about what really matters when speaking English. I asked her, "What do you want to do with your English? Do you want to sound perfect, or do you want to connect with people?" That question changed everything for her. She realized that her main goal was to communicate her ideas, share her thoughts, and connect with others. She didn't need to erase her accent to do that. In fact, her accent was part of who she was. It told a story about her background and her culture. It made her unique. So, we shifted her focus. Instead of spending all her energy trying to sound like a native speaker, she started practicing ways to make her English clearer and easier to understand. She worked on slowing down her speech, pronouncing key words more clearly, and using simple phrases that got her message across. She embraced her natural accent instead of fighting it. And guess what? Her confidence soared. She started enjoying speaking English more because the pressure to be perfect disappeared. Niren's experience is something I want you to remember. Your accent is not a problem. It's a part of your identity. Native speakers have different accents, too, and no one expects you to sound exactly like them. What people care about is how clearly you can share your ideas and connect with them. When you stop chasing perfection, you free yourself to communicate naturally and confidently. I also want to tell you about another learner, Arjun from Mumbai. He once told me he felt embarrassed about his accent and avoided speaking English in meetings at work. But when he shifted his mindset and focused on connecting with his colleagues, rather than perfect pronunciation, he noticed a big change. People appreciated his ideas, and his confidence grew. He realized that making small adjustments to improve clarity was enough. He didn't have to lose his identity or sound perfect. So how do you aim for connection instead of perfection? First, accept your accent as part of who you are. Don't let fear of judgment stop you from speaking. Second, focus on being clear. Use simple words and phrases. Pronounce key words so your listener can follow your message easily. Third, slow down a bit. When you rush, your words get lost. Speaking at a comfortable pace helps your listener understand you better. Remember, connection happens when your message reaches someone else. It's about making meaning, not about imitating every sound perfectly. People respect your effort and enjoy talking to you when you speak with confidence and clarity. Your personality and passion shine through, and that is what really matters. I want you to take a moment and think about your own experience. Have you ever avoided speaking because you felt your accent was wrong or not good enough? How did that affect your confidence? Now imagine shifting that feeling to one where your goal is to connect and share your ideas, no matter what your accent sounds like. How would that change your speaking? This mindset shift is powerful. It removes the pressure and replaces it with freedom. You can make mistakes, you can have an accent, and you can still be an effective communicator. In fact, your unique voice is something people will remember. Your goal is to be understood and to build bridges with the people you speak to. If this idea makes sense to you, I encourage you to practice speaking with connection in mind. When you talk to friends, colleagues, or in English classes, remind yourself that it's okay to have an accent. Focus on getting your message across clearly and confidently. Over time, you'll notice your speaking improves naturally because you're relaxed and engaged, not tense and trying to be perfect. Keep in mind, perfection is a moving target, and often an unrealistic one. Every native speaker has words they mispronounce or accents you might find challenging. The secret is not perfection, it's connection. And connection opens doors to new friendships, career opportunities, and personal growth. So as you continue your English learning journey, remember Niren and Arjun's stories. They found freedom and success by accepting their accents and focusing on clear communication. You can do the same. Speak with confidence, aim for connection, and enjoy the process of sharing your voice with the world. I want to talk to you about something that might sound simple, but is incredibly powerful. Small, daily practice leads to big results. When it comes to improving your English pronunciation or any part of your language learning, the key is consistency, not intensity. It's much better to spend just a few minutes every day practicing than to do long, exhausting sessions only, once in a while. I say this because I've seen it with so many learners, and I want you to have the same success. Let me tell you about a student named Thandi from Johannesburg. Thandi was a busy woman. She worked full-time, had a family to take care of, and didn't have hours to study English every day. She felt stuck with her pronunciation because she couldn't commit to long study sessions. But then she decided to try something different. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment to study for hours, she started dedicating just 10 minutes every day to focused pronunciation practice. She used her phone to listen to short English podcasts, repeated tricky sounds, and recorded herself speaking. It wasn't much, but it was daily. After a few weeks, Thandi noticed her pronunciation was clearer, and she felt more confident when speaking English at work. Her colleagues told her they understood her much better, and she didn't feel as nervous during meetings. What really impressed me was that she kept this habit for months. Over time, those small 10-minute practices added up, and she made huge progress without feeling overwhelmed or burned out. This shows how powerful small daily habits can be. When you practice regularly, your brain and mouth get used to the new sounds and patterns naturally. You build muscle memory, which helps your pronunciation become automatic. Plus, daily practice keeps your motivation high because you see steady progress instead of feeling stuck. I also want you to think about how you can fit a little practice into your own routine. Maybe it's during your morning coffee, your commute, or before going to bed. You don't need special tools or expensive courses, just a few minutes of focused listening, repeating, and speaking each day. Try using podcasts, apps, or even reading out loud. The important thing is to be consistent. Another reason daily practice works is that it reduces pressure. When you know you only need to practice a small amount each day, it feels doable and less intimidating. You don't have to be perfect every time, and mistakes become part of the learning process rather than a reason to stop. This mindset makes it easier to keep going, even on busy or difficult days. I've also seen that small daily efforts help you notice subtle improvements that keep you motivated. You might hear a sound clearly for the first time, or pronounce a word without hesitation. These little wins build up your confidence and make you want to practice more. It becomes a positive cycle where practice leads to progress, and progress fuels motivation. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a race. Some days you'll feel more motivated than others, and that's okay. The key is to keep showing up. Even when you don't feel perfect or fluent, those minutes count. Over weeks and months, you'll look back and be amazed at how far you've come. So I encourage you to choose one small habit related to pronunciation that you can do every day. Maybe it's repeating 5 new words, practicing a difficult sound, or recording yourself speaking for 1 minute. Start small and make it a routine. Consistency beats intensity every time. Think about Thandi from Johannesburg and how she transformed her English just by practicing a little every day. You can do this too. The secret is to keep going, to be patient with yourself, and to enjoy the process. Your voice matters, and with small daily steps, you'll make big progress that lasts. If you ever feel stuck, remember that no one became fluent overnight. It's the small actions taken regularly that lead to real improvement. And when you commit to daily practice, you're building a foundation for confident and clear English that will open doors in your personal and professional life. Now, I want you to reflect on your own schedule and find that 5 or 10 minutes you can dedicate to your pronunciation practice tomorrow. It doesn't have to be perfect or complicated, just consistent. That's how you'll create lasting change. Your journey with English is unique, but this principle of small daily practice applies to everyone. I'm excited for you to experience the results that come from patience and persistence. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and your English will keep getting better day by day.